took the same concept of expected and unexpected, but we took it a step further, and we talked about how those behaviors affect the thoughts and feelings of those around us, and how does influencing the thoughts and feelings of those, ultimately, how does that affect us in the long run, right? Because it always comes full circle back to us. So we started reading this book called You Are a Social Detective, and it's great. So we just started talking about, last week we read like social superheroes, but this time it was social detectives. So we talked about how there's different smarts in our brains, and they're talking about, I have Lego smarts, I have math smarts. I'm like, cool, but did you guys know that there's something called social smarts too? And social smarts are what we use when we're around other people. So for example, basic perspective taking is recognizing that I have thoughts, recognizing that other people have thoughts. Sometimes we can have the same thoughts about the same thing, depending on if we're joint attention looking at the same thing. And I can influence, what kind of thought you're having about me based on my own behavior. But we're just starting with, I have a thought, you have a thought, and what do people think about? And then we started talking about, so you guys, let's be social detectives right now. What can you find in these pictures that's expected? So we started with the expected behavior, and they're pretty good with what they remembered from last week. So they're looking at the picture, they're like, well, they're taking turns, and these people's bodies are in a group, so they're already using the vocabulary on their own, and they're thinking about the same thing. So I said, cool, yeah, those are all expected behaviors, right? And so I started, relating what we see on the picture to the table. I said, so are we a group right now? And they're like, yeah, we're a group. I'm like, cool, that is super expected. And so then I introduced what's called the likely scale. And this is a great visual to represent like social memories and what kind of impact our behavior has on other people's thoughts. So the way I explained it is we made some expected formula, expected liquid, expected juice, whatever you want to call it. So every time we do something that's expected, we put a little bit of expected formula into our likely scale, like that. And so what this represents is how likely it is for someone to do something that, is friendly towards us. How likely is it that they would do it, and how unlikely it is, right? And so basically when we do things that make people have good thoughts, good feelings, then our likely scale goes up, right? And so at the end of the day, if we, hey mom, I want to watch American Idol, after, I brush my teeth, or hey, I want to get dessert after dinner, whatever it may be in your household, it all depends on, well, did you make me have good thoughts and feelings about you, right? So, like, I'm thinking, like in Caden's case, all kiddos with social thinking, but I see it most, I think, in Caden is like thinking about what I want, and always thinking about me. But how often are we thinking about, the other people around us, and why do I need to care about what other people think around us? Because ultimately it's going to affect you, right? And so as we're reading the book, we're studying all these expected behaviors. We talked about, what it looks like to be a part of a group without touching. What does it look like when your brain is a part of a group? So what we did is we took these little Play-Doh things, and we actually made our own brains and bodies out of Play-Doh. So let's say, like, this is my body and this is my brain, right? And so we actually talked about what does it look like when our body's in the group. So right now we're all sitting at the table, so everybody put their body like into the group. And I said, what does it look like when our bodies fall out of the group? So if someone gets out of their chair, I'm like, Nathan's body fell out of the group, and then I like rolled it off the table to represent, this is what it looks like when your body falls out of the group. And so I'm like, but bring your body back in. And as soon as he did, I'm like, Nathan's body came back in the group. And then I'm like, that is very expected. And then I started filling up the glass, just so they can see a connection, so they can learn what this represents and see connections between expected behavior and how high the glass gets. And then we started talking about a brain. So our bodies are in the group, but that doesn't necessarily mean our brains are in the group, right? So an example would be when you're sitting in class and the teacher's talking and you're just kind of doing your own thing, playing with this, and, a lot of the times kiddos with social thinking challenges are like, well, I am listening to everything you're saying. Like, I hear all the words you're saying, what's the big deal? But you have to take the listener's perspective, and that's not what they're doing. It's all perspective taking. So, I don't know if you're listening to me because you're not showing me with your eyes. Right. So noticing the eyes communicate, you're not showing me with your eyes that you are listening to me, so I'm going to assume that you're not. So I said, so what does it look like? And we're going to use the term like brain in and out of the group. So what does it look like when your brain falls out of the group? So even though my body's at the table, if my brain rolls off the table, it's going to look something like this. something like this, looking out the window, whatever it may be. So then we started practicing that and rolling our brains out of the group. I'm like, but show me what it looks like when your brains are in the group. And so they're all looking at me. And I said, okay, I'm going to wait till everybody's thinking about me. And boom, just that cue in itself brings their attention back to me. I'm like, awesome, guys. So I'm filling up the cup even more.
Oh, it's okay, Nathan.
Yeah,
It's okay, Nathan.
it's okay.
It's not real, Nathan. It's not real.
There's a little spider.
Oh, there's a spider.
There's a real one.
No, he got it.
I think he got it.
I think he got it.
I think he's dead, guys. Where'd he go?
It's just a little tiny one. If it was anything bigger than I would have gotten it.
Alright, I think he's gone, guys.
He's gone, Nathan.
Diamond have the video.
Oh, sorry, guys.
That's okay. You didn't get me.
And so we started talking about how the different behaviors, it's not just in a group setting, but what does it look like on the playground? What does expected behavior look like on the playground? What does it look like at home when mom and dad ask you to put on your PJs, brush your teeth? What does it look like when we're doing something expected with our actions by actually putting away, things we're not supposed to be doing? And how do we use our words to match our actions? And how can we tell when people are feeling good, having good thoughts and feelings about us, calm voice? And then we went on to the unexpected behavior, and they're pretty good at identifying. They're like, oh, he's only thinking about what he wants to think about. I'm like, you're right, he is. And so I said, when that happens, you guys, we call that a bucket dipper. So unexpected behaviors actually take, unexpected formula back into the bucket, right? Or back into the expected bucket.
Oh, whoopsie.
And so, we went over the same scenarios, but talked about what it looks like when we're being unexpected.
Sorry.
And they're actually pretty good because, I think it was Caden that pointed out. He was like, she's feeling a bit worried. I'm like, you're right. How can you tell she's feeling a bit worried? And they're like, well, he's thinking about what he wants to think about. He's, doing things. I'm like, you're right. And how does that make the teacher feel? Makes them feel a little sad, and they kept pointing to the check-in like, she's feeling like a number 5 or a number 6. I'm like, you're right, she's not feeling too great. And same at home with mom and dad. If we say no, if we just don't listen and keep doing what we want to do, so differentiating between our own agenda, our plan, thinking about me, kid, versus the group plan. And so, I used the cup. So I said, you guys, I have a lot of fun things planned today. So I'm like, do you think, how can we make sure that we get to do the fun stuff at the end, like watch a DVD or do the scavenger hunt? I said, does our skill need to be down here or up here? They're like, up there. I'm like, you're right, it'll be more likely. And this is very abstract for first graders, but I'm like, it'll be more likely that we'll play a game, that you'll make me want to play a game with you guys if you make me have good thoughts and feelings about you. And so I kept using this throughout the rest of the session. Every time they were doing something expected, I was being very generous with it at first, always focusing on the positive. So every time they did something right, I'd be like, wow, you guys, and I would fill it up halfway. I'm like, you guys were showing me that you were thinking about me, super expected. And so, that's how you can start this at home. You can actually make your own likely scale and expected formula and just keep a permanent place for it in the house. Maybe it's like the kitchen, whatever it may be. So I think since they're still learning the concepts a little bit, I would, when you first start using it, use it within a very small structured setting, like if you were to play a game with them. So say in this 20-minute period, you can, I don't know if you guys have a timer, like a great tool. This is called a time timer.
Yeah.
What it does is you actually, so if the activity is going to be 20 minutes, you just use the shaded red region up to 20, and then the battery back here will start to make this tick away on its own. So it's a great visual to see, how much time we have and how much time is left, because time management isn't always the strongest point in our kids' social thinking challenges. So you can say, okay, in this 20-minute game that we're going to play, do you think that you can make mom or dad's likely scale filled up to the top, and then we can have a popsicle, after we're done, if you make me feel like giving you one. And so, you can start filling it up generously if they start taking turns, if they're sharing, if they're saying friendly words to each other, good job. Then start filling up the cup. And once you see that they're getting the concepts a little bit more, you can just try to start to, stretch out the amount of time that the task requires. Instead of a 20-minute task, let's see if he can finish his homework, or, once they get really good at it, then you can do it throughout the span of the whole day. So, from the moment you wake up, from the time you go to bed, thoughts and feelings stay. And that's the most important point we want to teach is social memory, that the thoughts and feelings that you're giving me now, they don't go away once the event, whatever happened, once the moment is over, those thoughts and feelings still stick with me. And our kids don't really realize that. They think, new day, new thing. It's like, well, like it's so far removed, right? But they have to remember, it's like if you keep a scale throughout the day, and you're filling it up and you're taking it away, so when it comes to bedtime and they finally go up to you and ask, hey, I want this and this and this, you're like, well, remember that time when you said this to Dad or you did this and it gave me this kind of thought and feeling? Well, maybe you can try better next time. So it's not really, punishing them in a way, but it's just saying, hey, this is how you made me think and feel, so you can change the way I think and feel about you by doing what's expected, and then you can get, you'd make me want to do things for you to reward you. So how do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that.
So
maybe you can even use it for like something very specific, like let's say 2 kids are playing, brother and sister, and you say, okay, if you can make your sister feel, so, instead of arguing back and forth.
Right.
So it could be very specific.
Absolutely.
Gameplay.
You can modify it however you like, and I think those very structured, settings where you can actually watch it. Like if you were to fill up your glass within just a really short 15-20 minute session.
Start small.
Start small, and then they can see what kind of reward they get once they fill up their glass, and they start to understand a little bit more. So I'm going to use this with them consistently throughout the sessions. So as we keep using it, and you guys have questions, if you try it at home and you're like, what do you think about this? Just let me know. We can compare notes. But I thought it would be great for all of them. And then what we did a social thinking scavenger hunt. So what I did was I placed these all over the room, and we even went out to the hallway. I started posting these just all over the clinic. Where did my guys go? So I had different pictures of different fictional characters, like Blue and Pooh, and above each one of their heads, I put one of these little thought bubbles. So as you can see, like with Nemo over here, like it was just a blank thought bubble before. And then what they did was I said, okay, we're going to be social detectives of our own. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. I said, we're going to be social detectives of our own, but instead of using a magnifying glass, social thinkers, we use an iPad. And they're like, whoa, cool. And so what we did was we took, I made little QR codes like this. I said, okay, guys, here's our first clue. So the clues are going to tell us who we're going to look for next.
Oh, cool.
And so we got to use our little scanner. And they get to scan it like that. And then a picture comes up.
They like that.
Like, whoa. And they're like, who are we going to look for next? They're like, Pooh. And so, like we try to find Pooh, and he has a blank thought bubble above his head. And so the activity was, I'm like, okay, in order for Pooh to give you the next clue, you have to think like Pooh. So this is perspective taking 101 here, because they're very used to thinking about what they like and what they like to do. But let's think about other people. What do they like to do, and how can we adjust our behavior? If we're thinking like grand scheme of things, like letting somebody else go first for the sake of them feeling good about us, playing a game that we know they like to play just because. The inside rule is if we do things that they like, they'll do things that we like to do. It's the give and take of all relationships in a way. But in order to start, we have to think, well, other people have thoughts that are different than yours. But so we just start with fictional characters that they know pretty well. And so we're like, so what does Pooh like to think about? And so in this case, I had a picture of Honey. So we put the Honey above his head, but they started going on, and they're like, oh, but Piglet and Rabbit. I'm like, yeah, he likes to think about all those things, right? And so we kept going around the room and kept scanning codes, and as the activity kept going, they were already predicting, before they even saw the picture, when they just saw, okay, Dora the Explorer is up next, they already started thinking, oh, she likes to think about boots and the backpack, and she has a map, and I'm like, yeah, so you guys are already thinking like Dora likes to think about. So just putting themselves in the perspective of a fictional character, I think is easier for them first, before we move on to real people, which we'll get to shortly in a few sessions, but I thought it was great. And then once I got back to the table, then I'm like, okay, now you guys get to draw a picture of what you guys like to think about. And so Caden likes to think about food. Nathan likes to think about trains.
Yes.
And it was cool because I was actually looking at a shirt. I'm like, I'm going to make a smart guess. I'm like, I can see that you're wearing a train shirt, so that makes me think, that you like to think about trains. We're making those social inferences already. Colin likes to think about
Presents?
Colin, what do you like to think about?
Is it presents?
Or is it computer?
What do you like to think about? What do you like to think about?
How funny.
And then I like to think about video games. So what we did was, kind of like what we did last week, I'm like, okay, on the count of three, we're going to hold our thought bubbles above our heads. So they're not only thinking about what they like to think about, but they're forced to look at other people's thought bubbles and think about what other people like to think about it, because they can't even see their own anymore, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and then we practice friendly comments again. Like, so, when we see, like, that Colin likes to think about TV, what's a friendly comment? We can say, oh, cool, I like TV too, or, wow, food, cool, what kind of food do you like, right? And so they're great with the friendly comments. A little bit of prompting with Kaden still with that, but because he's still kind of on his own agenda. He's like, I'm not done. I'm like, we got to keep up with the group plan, buddy. So we'll keep practicing that. But, yeah, they had a lot of fun today. And I think it was a great activity. And just the fact that they're already starting to use the vocabulary just after 1 week, 2 now. But they're really, I think, picking it up. And, going back to your example with Nathan, what he did to me today, it was pretty great. He was like, nice shirt, Nick. And this was at the beginning of the session. I was like, thanks, Nathan. I'm like, that makes me feel really good. I'm having a good thought. And then at the end of the session, he's like, nice shirt, Nick. I'm like, thanks, but didn't you already tell me that before? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah. So, the first time you said it, that made me, put liquor in my cup. That gave me great thoughts and feelings. But when you say it again, I'm like, that kind of gives me actually a little bit of an odd thought when you say the same thing a second time. He's like, but it made you feel good, right? I'm like, it did the first time. But if you say something over and over
again,
it's
a hard concept.
It's a hard concept for him.
Because it's nice.
Right.
But when do you stop?
And he's being so friendly. He's being he thinks he's being a good social thinker by making other people feel good. But the inside rule is if you say the same thing over and over or over complimenting, right, it makes people think, okay, buddy, what's your deal, right? Like I'm kind of starting to have an odd thought. And that's exactly what he does. And and that's a hard concept to teach, but we're just going to teach it within the concept of just odd thoughts versus good thoughts, or strange feelings versus good feelings. And so it's like, hey, so I just explicitly explained to him, just like, so it's really friendly. It made me fill my cup up when you do it once, but if you do it again, it gives me an odd thought. So it just works on, he'll think about, because I'm trying to think, is there any case where we're repeating the same thing over and over again? Not really. So I feel like a general rule of thumb is like, say it once and just
let it go.
Let it go. We'll call that the rule. So.
Okay. Great.
So yeah, any questions yet? Any thoughts?
Yeah, Caden is about Caden. He's got family in town. He's got cousins from Maryland, so he's even more keyed up than normal.
but he's doing well, with the cueing. Like I'm trying to remember, there's one specific example where he was able to bring his body back into the group after I started using the vocabulary with him. So I think he's just more of a strong-willed child, but I think
very much so.
I think this would be good. Just keep working on the vocabulary. Child. Because I think we were playing a ball rolling game too, and he had the idea about throwing a ball at my head, right? And then I'm just like, okay, so I'm like, that's what Caden wants to do, but the other guys, they're wanting to keep playing the game. They keep wanting to roll the ball. So I'm like, if you can't follow the group's plan, that means nobody can play the ball. And then how is that going to make everybody else feel about you? And he's like, but I am thinking about the group's plan. I'm like, if you're throwing the ball at my head, that means you're not thinking about the group's plan. And I said, so I'm going to put the ball away. And he's just like, well, how do I get it back? And I'm like, well, if you can follow the group plan next time, then we can keep playing. But until then, and I'm also commenting, I'm like, now your friends are going to have those odd thoughts about you, like we talked about in the book. We talked about friends. I said, if your friends keep having odd thoughts, they're not going to want to hang out with you. They're not going to want to play with you, right? And so I said, I think he understood that concept. So I think it's just going to be a lot of finding those teachable moments and being able to use the terminology to help him understand.
We started to use rock for those.
Yeah.
Stop using. I hate superheroes.
Oh yeah. As soon as he came in, he was just like, "Take that poster off." He's like, "I don't want to talk about superheroes today." And I'm like, well, actually, it's not a part of my plan, but I'm like, we're gonna talk about him next week, so.
Yeah, he's the poster child for rock ring.
I use the terms expected and unexpected home, which worked well, and then the check-in.
The check-in,
yes. I said, you made Mama too, and he's like, I remember that.
Because the emotion vocabulary isn't always their strongest point.
Yeah.
Figuring out like
numbers work.
Now, even the basic ones are difficult for him. But what I find is that my students always they love that because they go, he's feeling like a 5, he's feeling like a 4, and they have the visual representation of
I should take a
what the
picture of
face
that.
looks like. Yeah, it's called the Incredible
the
5-point scale.
Yeah.
So you can actually find it off of Michelle Garcia Winner's website.
Oh, really?
Or
Okay.
Probably Amazon.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want to buy the poster as like a visual for his bedroom
Probably
or
just
something.
draw it myself.
Yeah. Right.
1, 2, 3.
Yes. So what happened, you guys? So I'm all done talking to the parents.